China Global Television Network.
Chinese President Xi Jinping holds talks with the French President, German Chancellor and the European Commission President. Algeria's Army Chief Ahmed Gaid Salah asked for the presidency to be declared vacant. And the UN says nearly 2 million people have been affected by Cyclone Idai in Mozambique. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Findings on the cause of the deadly Ethiopian Airlines crash are set to be released. And the UK Prime Minister suffers a major setback after Parliament takes control of the Brexit process. Of course, all that coming up within the programme. Now it's back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, we start the hour in France, where a four-way meeting of major world leaders has taken place in Paris. Chinese President Xi Jinping sat down with French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. They discussed global governance and trade. During a news conference, President Xi said cooperation has been a mainstream feature of China-Europe relations, and any differences that do arise are benign and stem from competition. The Chinese president also said the steps Beijing is taking in its reform and opening up will not stop.
China will continue to advance its reform and opening up. In 40 years, we finished a journey of industrialization that took developed countries 300 years. We need to keep forging ahead and at the same time adapt ourselves to the new circumstances and open up further. China supports necessary reforms of the World Trade Organization in order to build a more open world economy, to maintain the multilateral trading system, and to guide global economic globalization towards healthy development.
Well, French President Emmanuel Macron echoed Xi's call to safeguard multilateralism. He said competition between the EU and China must not lead to political isolationism or a breakdown in world trade systems. He and his Chinese counterpart promised to work side by side with Europe.
Dialogue between China and Europe has become essential to define global balances, to preserve multilateralism, especially in the current context, an unprecedented crisis in our recent history. We just, all four of us, held discussions over 1 hour, very fruitful ones on these subjects, talking about bilateral relations between China and the European Union, and also talking about our visions of multilateralism.
And European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and German Chancellor Angela Merkel also agreed that all sides should work together to oppose unilateralism. Merkel added that her country is considering joining the Belt and Road Initiative.
I hope that part of our homework will be completed by then. The Investment Protection Agreement, the country of origin labeling, and of course an active European role. Germany wants to participate in the One Belt, One Road initiative, the Silk Road. I believe this is a very important project. We as Europeans want to play an active part, and that must lead to a certain reciprocity, and we are still wrangling over that a bit.
China and Europe can and must achieve major things together for ourselves and for the entire world, and we need to do this, not in a mode of confrontation, but cooperation and based on trust. It's true, we're partners, strategic partners. We are competitors as well.
And let's turn to Mozambique now, where a UN agency estimates that 1.85 million people have been affected by Cyclone Idai. The UN has ranked the humanitarian crisis as a level 3 emergency, the same level as Syria and Yemen. Aid workers are ramping up relief supplies to deal with the unfolding scale of the disaster. The tropical storm has killed at least 686 people, with the number expected to rise. The port city of Beira and surrounding areas remain flooded. The United Nations Humanitarian Agency, OCHA, is calling for more aid to help handle that crisis. Meanwhile, a fresh consignment of medical supplies from South Africa has made its way to flood-ravaged regions in Mozambique. Rescue crews have been working around the clock to save thousands of people stranded since the cyclone made landfall more than 10 days ago. CGTN's Julie Shire was at the Waterkloof Air Force Base outside Pretoria. She filed this report.
It's turning into a humanitarian crisis for southern Africa, rated by the United Nations on the same scale as Yemen and Syria. Cyclone Idai hit Mozambique more than 10 days ago, spreading to Malawi and Zimbabwe.
This is our biggest water crisis in terms of where we have to rescue people from the water in the 26 years as at Gift of the Givers. This is the biggest for us. And it was also a challenge for our people on the ground because not only was Mozambique affected, but also Zimbabwe.
Rescue workers have been working tirelessly, plucking people from the water. Aid has been trickling in from South Africa and elsewhere. But there's hope that it will now flow easier as flood waters recede and roads are reopened. NGO Gift of the Givers and the military have led the relief effort from South Africa.
People has lost everything from their possessions to their medications, and right now our teams are at work trying to assist people, still trying to rescue people, giving medical assistance and also distributing humanitarian aid on the ground.
12 tons of life-saving food and medical supplies are on this plane destined for Mozambique and Malawi. They will be used to feed and treat thousands of people left desolate and starving in the wake of Cyclone Idai. The threat of water-related illnesses are now also growing.
The problem which we have that after the floods is waterborne diseases, because the spread of cholera and other waterborne diseases, that is the most critical thing. In coming months, if we don't treat those people, the situation will going to go worse.
As long as the requirement is there, we will be assisting, we will be aiding. Our people that we've put into those areas will remain there up to a certain time, and whereafter we will reassess. So at this stage we are aiding in IDP camps at some certain stages. These people need to be moved out into other places where they can be stabilized and also normalized.
It may be months before the people of Mozambique, Malawi and Zimbabwe start to rebuild their lives, but at least for now, help is on the way. Julie Shara, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
Meanwhile, in Zimbabwe, residents of Chimanimani Township and surrounding villages are gradually recovering from the impact of Cyclone Idai. The local Chinese community is also chipping in to help those affected.
Cyclone Idai hit Zimbabwe's eastern township of Chimanimani hard. The cyclone caused flooding and triggered landslides. Many roads were damaged.
Initially, the road was so bad, and we are trying our best to help the community so that they can cross over, because over there there's some people who are on the other side of the area who cannot afford to come here. Some of them are old, some of them cannot walk because it's a long distance here, but we are trying our best just to help them to cross over to that area.
Members of the Chinese community have been helping clear debris from the road.
We would like to thank the Chinese community. They are clearing our blocked roads to help with the ease of transportation in the affected areas.
Meanwhile, victims of Cyclone Idai continue to line up to receive aid and counseling services. Many lost everything in the storm.
It started to rain at 10 p.m. After that, we experienced a terrible wind and my house collapsed with the bricks falling on me. I was saved by a fellow neighbor who rescued me out of the house, but that's all she could do, as all my belongings were swept away.
According to UN estimates, at least 2.6 million people were affected by the tropical storm across 3 countries. Astatal, CGTN.
Now turning to other news, Algeria's army chief has called for President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to be declared physically unfit to govern. The statement comes after weeks of mass protests demanding the ailing leader step down. The move would potentially clear the way for elections to be organized in the coming months unless the president recovers. Bouteflika is now 82 years old and he's rarely appeared in public since suffering a stroke in 2013. Under the constitution, the chairman of Parliament's upper house would serve as caretaker president.
Algerian military chief Field Marshal Ahmed Qaid Saleh has announced on Tuesday that Article 102 of the Algerian constitution should be implemented. The article declares a vacancy in the presidential seat due to the president's severe illness. It's the first time a government official declares President Abdelaziz Bouteflika unfit to rule since his illness 6 years ago. If implemented, the article shall bring Abdelkader bin Saleh, the Speaker of the Algerian Upper House, as interim president with a maximum duration of 45 days. During that period, a constitutional council shall look into the health condition of the Algerian president. If the president remains severely ill after that period, if he's still declared unfit, and after a vote of 2/3 of the parliament, the president would be considered resigned, and presidential election must be held within 90 days at the most. In this election, the parliament speaker cannot run for president. Opposition powers have been calling for the implementation of Article 102 for years. They became more vocal in recent weeks with the spread of the unrest Algeria has seen. In 2013, Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika had a stroke and was hospitalized in France. He appeared a year later for the first time on a wheelchair during the presidential election, which he has won. In recent weeks, however, his health condition has deteriorated severely. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's get to some analysis on these latest developments in, of course, Algeria. Let's talk to Ziad Akil, a political analyst and researcher with the Akram Center for Security and Strategic Studies. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, Ziad. Of course, we know that Bouteflika has been in power since the year 1999. Just talk us through the significance of the statement made by Algeria's army chief in relation to the country's leadership.
First of all, good evening. It's always a pleasure to be here. And well, ever since the start of the conflict about Bouteflika's presidency in Algeria, the question has been, what will the army's position be like? And at the same time, there is a question of, will the army fragment? Which happens all over the history of comparative revolutions or contentious politics. And at the same time, the Algerian army, as one of the most powerful armies in the Arab world and in Africa, has been politicized before. So the significance of the statement has to do with the fact that the army has chosen the institutionalism of the army as one of the state institutions, not to vote for President Bouteflika, which weakens a lot the position or the political position of Bouteflika's wing and his supporters.
Of course, Bouteflika's position, as you suggest, may have been weakened, but he has survived every threat to his power in the past 20 years. How is he likely to respond to demands that he vacates the presidency?
Well, right now, I believe that his health condition is another new factor that perhaps has been existent, but not that extensively in the past few years. So how is he likely to respond? He is likely, first of all, to offer a bunch of reformations. The idea is that the condition of the street, the condition of the opposition, they will not accept any proposed reformations. Will the army accept it or not? Apparently, it will not. So the point right now is how much international support can Bouteflika and his regime and his supporters get from the outside, from the West, to try and implement its power furthermore, because its domestic alliances are fragmenting, they are breaking up.
And on the other end of that scale really is the question of how much regional support is the army chief likely to receive, with the suggestion that Bouteflika vacate office. I mean, is Egypt likely to accept this proposal?
I believe not only Egypt, but a lot of the regional forces in North Africa and even in the Middle East and the Arab world will support the Algerian military in whatever decision they take. Right now, the regional balance of power between Bouteflika and the Algerian army is in the favor of Algerian army. If you look at the new political elites in the Arab world and in North Africa, you will realize that the militaries play a big role. And this is why they believe that the military should have a role in the decision-making during political tension. So Egypt, on the head of all other regional actors, will be very much in favor of the decision the Algerian military will take.
And now, of course, with the army having stated this very bold position, and of course, from your understanding of the Algerian political system, what should we expect to happen in the coming days?
I think that what we will see in the coming days will be more popular tension, more people taking to the streets in Algeria, more elites gathering to actually demonstrate the Bouteflika regime, and perhaps one of two things: either a set of reformations offered by the Bouteflika regime, most probably that won't be accepted, or a set of compensations that the regime will try to offer because it realizes the weak position in which it's in. Of course, this will change very much if there are regional statements, official statements by states saying that they support one of the two sides, either the army or Bouteflika. Much more likely it will be the army. And this will determine the shape of how the movement in the street will be shaped within the Algerian conflict in this moment.
Indeed, a situation that we will have to be keeping our eyes on. Thank you so much, Ziad Akhil, joining us there, of course, from Cairo. We do apologize for that long delay in that connection. Well, time now for us to take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. We update you on the deadly massacre of villagers in Mali last weekend. And China helps to establish a school of excellence in Benin.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice. To security matters now. We start in Somalia, where an improvised explosive device attached to a vehicle went off in Mogadishu, killing 2 people and injuring 1. The explosion occurred near the busy KM4 junction. Security forces arrived at the scene of the explosion, barring the public from the area as firefighters struggled to cool the vehicle in flames. The last attack was on Saturday, after gunmen stormed a building that hosted the nation's Ministry of Labor and Social Services, killing at least 15 people, including the department's deputy minister. While there was no immediate claim of responsibility, Al-Shabaab militants have regularly carried out such attacks in the past. 7 people in South Sudan are facing charges of terrorism, sabotage and crimes against the state. An entrepreneur and an economist are among those accused at South Sudan's High Court. As CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports, they've been detained without trial for several months.
Among the accused is a businessman, Kerobino Wall. Authorities here say in October last year, Kerobino Wall, already in detention without trial, disarmed guards, mobilized his fellow detainees and took over the National Security Building. Wall is a former child soldier and CEO of private security firm CAS Security. Wall says his actions were in protest at spending months in detention without trial or being told why he was being held. The prosecution presented weapons it says were used by Wall and his co-accused to take control of the National Security Building and an investigation file. Defense lawyers say they are hopeful their clients will be acquitted of all charges. They say the prosecution hasn't produced any concrete evidence.
Procedurally, the file that was for investigation can never be taken as evidence, and therefore whatever is inconsistent will not have any effect in the trial.
The trial comes at the time when the East African Court of Justice has summoned South Sudan's government to answer claims of arbitrary arrest and detentions in the country, including the case of Kerobino Wall. The case was filed by the Pan-African Lawyers Union, and the summon has been welcomed by Amnesty International. For now, the defense lawyer in the case of Wall and his co-accused says the Juba court has finally granted them access to proper medical treatment. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
And now to a deadly attack in Mali. The UN is urging authorities in the country to hold a self-defense group accountable for their attack against Fulani villages. The assault left over 130 people dead, including 50 children.
The first assessments speak for themselves. 1/3 of people killed are children. Half of the injured people are children. The schools are increasingly threatened. So the threat against children is clear, and children are paying the highest price of this crisis in Mali.
Mali is struggling with fighting violent extremism. And I understand that many of these communities, either they're using this as a pretext for intercommunal violence, or they are painting themselves as so-called self-defense groups, and they're taking the law into their own hands and getting rid of what they perceive to be the threat of violent extremism, which of course ends up meaning that many children are mercilessly killed, people's bodies are thrown into wells, people are burned alive in their homes.
This is Ogosago, a village in the Mopti region of Mali. Gunmen surrounded the village at dawn on Saturday before attacking people in their homes. The attackers targeted members of the Fulani ethnic community. The incident took place while UN ambassadors were in the country.
We obviously condemn in the strongest terms this despicable attack. I speak on behalf of France and the Security Council. We are crying together with the Malians, the victims of this despicable tragedy.
The United Nations mission in Mali says it stands ready to support the government in its efforts to calm the situation. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for the perpetrators to be brought to book. Malian authorities want to redouble their efforts to bring back peace and stability.
The team should be permanently mobilized. We are not in times of peace, we're in times of war.
The violence is over land for grazing cattle. The Dogon and Fulani have disputed over access to land and water, and the armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL have exploited these rivalries in Mali. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
To the Middle East now, armed groups in Gaza have accepted a ceasefire agreement. Egypt has quickly intervened to broker the deal between the Palestinians and Israelis, which reflected the confidence both rivaling parties have in Cairo. Here's CGTN's Adel Al-Mahri with more.
Few hours after Israel launched its Monday's airstrikes on Gaza, Palestinian factions declared a ceasefire agreement has been reached. Cairo once again rose as the partner brokering that agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Egypt very much interested in peace than in having the area turned upside down in turmoil or in conflict, because we have invested a lot in peace and we are trying to reap the consequences of peace. If we let the situation slip from our hands, it will be dangerous for everybody in the Middle East.
The ceasefire was announced by a coalition of Gaza's armed groups who've showed confidence in the Egyptian efforts to restore calm. Cairo controls the Rafah Passage, the Strip's main supply gateway and access point through which Palestinians can travel. That has made Rafah an influential leverage in negotiations with Hamas, the group that controls Gaza.
Egypt has political weight and credit of trust amongst all parties in the Middle East that enables it to intervene in any conflict, especially when it concerns the Palestinians. Egypt is the only country that can give political and security guarantees to any political process, while most other countries only provide financial commitment. The Egyptian move was very fast this time, as Gaza reflects directly on Egypt's national security.
Egypt has very much experience in war and in peace with Israel. That's why we have something to offer. We have expertise. We also can accommodate any outbursts by Israel or outbursts by Hamas, and therefore we are in a position to control the situation.
As all previous ceasefire agreements, experts believe it's only a matter of time before violence returns.
With Trump's latest recognition to the Israeli-occupied land in the Golan, many fear that violence could erupt at any time. Palestinians may soon lose hope in peace. It's becoming clear that Israel is not letting go of the 1967 territories, despite UN Security Council resolution, and Washington appears to be supporting that stance. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's come to news now from here in Kenya. A devastating drought is ravaging parts of the country. It's left over 1 million people in arid areas in urgent need of assistance. Schools in affected areas have been hard hit, with several shutting down due to a lack of water and food. Our correspondent Robert Nagila visited one school in the Rift Valley that is a lifeline for both students and the local community as the drought bites.
About 15 kilometers from the nearest town center in Tiaty, Baringo County, an area hard hit by the prolonged drought, the Kenyan flag towers over Nelikat Primary School. With only 2 classrooms made of iron sheets, pupils take turns learning. The head teacher says the student population has dropped drastically in recent months as a result of the drought.
Many children left with their parents. In this area, they practice nomadism. So during a drought, parents moved the family seeking food for their animals, as we don't have a boarding school.
As they wait for their turn in the classroom, these students engage in extracurricular activities. A government-sponsored school feeding program caters for their lunch. Be the only meal of the day, and the reason some parents have sent their children to school. They're among the lucky ones. Several schools in the area have shut down due to lack of water. In arid areas, schools such as this one are a vital resource for the community. They not only provide education for the children, but food and water for surrounding areas.
When the dams dried up, the water the government supplies, we decided to share with the community. You can't refuse. Some are very old, others are very young. When they hear we have water, they bring their jerrycans.
Behind the main block, on top of the school's water tank, a young boy draws water from the tank for community members. Water delivered 24 hours earlier by the government is almost over, and they hope to be resupplied soon. Back in class, the Standard 5s are preparing for exams. I want to be a teacher, Evans Domo tells me. When school closes next week, chances are, like many of his fellow pupils, he will move away with his family and their animals, seeking food and shelter from the drought. The head teacher hopes most of them will be back next term. Bobat Nagila, CGTN, Baringo, Kenya.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, findings on the cause of the deadly Ethiopian Airlines crash set to be released. And the UK Prime Minister suffers a major setback after Parliament takes control of the Brexit process.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off with Ethiopian Airlines. The airline CEO, Tewolde Gebremariam, says he is expecting the preliminary release of a report into the March 10th crash of its Boeing 737-800 MAX by next week. Now, Tewolde also said the airline may or may not attend a briefing in the U.S. by Boeing about a planned update to the plane's software. This, of course, has been a focus of investigation into deadly crashes within months of each other that has now prompted grounding of the 737 MAX. Now, the CEO says the airline's relationship with Boeing was still sound. Boeing 737 MAX fleet has been grounded worldwide, wiping about $28 billion off the company's market value and certainly throwing doubt over advance orders of the plane worth more than $500 million.
I think we have taken the right decision to ground the airplane. And the fact that we have taken that right decision was endorsed by the entire world, because we cannot put even a single life at risk. This is perhaps a very rare occasion, maybe the second in the aviation history, where an investigation is being conducted while the airplanes are grounded. This is the second next to the Concorde problems that we had before.
Well, let's head to the UK now, where lawmakers voted on Monday to wrest control of Brexit from Prime Minister Theresa May for a day. And that was in a bid to find a way through the European Union divorce impasse that a majority in a parliament could support. The amendment was put forward by Oliver Letwin, who's a lawmaker from May's Conservative Party. It provides time for what's known as indicative votes on Brexit options. Now, the Prime Minister was dealt a fresh blow as the government was defeated by 329 votes to 302. Theresa May has said there is no guarantee she'll abide by their wishes.
329.
And to South Africa now, gold and platinum mining companies have announced plans to shed around 90,000 jobs in the next 3 years. Now, this follows the approved electricity price hikes of almost 10% for 3 years by the state-owned power utility firm Eskom. Africa's most industrialized economy is hugely affected by job cuts, with unemployment currently at about 26.6%. Several of the country's mining companies, including Sibanye-Stillwater, also plan to cut jobs in an effort to restructure their mining operations. Trade unions have threatened strikes as a result of the planned job losses, as well as across many of the state-owned companies. According to NERSA, 71% of all gold mines and about 65% of platinum mines were making losses, with gold production shrinking by 22.5%, while platinum output increased by 8.8% in January. And in Nigeria, the central bank has cut its benchmark interest rate to 13.5% from 14%. Of course, that's part of an attempt to stimulate a growth in Africa's biggest economy. Now, according to CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele, the move is the first rate cut since November 2015. The rate has been held at 14% since July 2016 to support the naira and to curb inflation in the country. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam taking a look at factors that influence the decision of the committee today.
The Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee is sitting for the second time this year. But most important, this is their first meeting since the general elections in February and March. In the last meeting held in January, the committee left its long-standing benchmark rates untouched. Lending rate was left at 14%, cash reserves ratio and liquidity ratio at 22.5% and 30% respectively. By then, their main concern was excessive spending during elections could drive inflation upwards, but that did not happen. Instead, inflation fell marginally from 11.37% to 11.31%. But most financial analysts predict the committee will most likely leave its key parameters untouched.
CBN is not likely to move on the base rate because the high base rate enables them to attract foreign investment to counteract the effect of a lowering of aggregate revenue. But having said that, the inflation has been coming down again. I mean, it's at 11.3, it's trending down. And so many factors will be weighing on their decision today and tomorrow. In fact, one thing that would encourage them is the bigger flow of foreign portfolio investment. Now, they are now happier that the trouble is over. Nigeria is out of the cliff.
Nigeria's government is projecting a 3% economic growth rate this year and 7% in the long run. A stable crude oil export at 2.3 million barrels per day will be key in achieving that growth, provided global prices remain stable. The committee will also carefully watch the passage of the 2019 budget, as it is likely to inject more cash into circulation. What's more, an increase in expenditure as a result of the recently passed minimum wage bill is also expected to feature prominently in the committee's deliberations.
Minimum wage payment again could have an impact. So they are watching those. But they don't, you have to cross that bridge when you get to the bridge.
Nigeria's lawmakers recently approved a 60% minimum wage hike, effectively raising minimum wage from over $50 to about $83. It's not yet clear by what margin this could increase disposable income on a monthly basis. The increase will be of particular interest for the Monetary Policy Committee that has been battling to lower inflation rate to a single digit. The central bank's governor, Godwin Emefiele, has already hinted the committee will maintain a tight monetary policy to ensure the gains made since recession isn't lost. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's stay in Nigeria. The capital, Abuja, has paid host to the first Globalization and Branding Summit. Now, the event aimed to seek ways to help local brands to expand to global markets by using creativity and personal branding. Small and medium-scale businesses in Nigeria contribute about 47.8%, nearly half of the nation's GDP. The government has been pushing to develop the businesses by providing collateral-free loans, amongst other incentives. Now, the standards of products and services offered, however, still need improvement to fully embrace global standards.
The global marketplace has evolved to set and maintain standards that cut across boards to mitigate risks to inferior quality of end products and service delivery. Consequently, the key has and always been the efficient dynamics of information management, utilizing latest ICT infrastructure and connectivity.
Be willing to give discounts, be willing to have meet and greet sessions where you get to know your client and your customer. Be open and appreciative of those who are buying from you and showcase that appreciation as well. Social media, just take advantage of it. It has its negative perks, it has its positive perks. Focus on the positive, let the negative go out the window.
Now, despite its immense potential, Africa's aviation market has been making losses, with one exception. Big carriers like Kenya Airways and South African Airlines have been losing hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Now, some argue that a more liberal aviation market might be the solution to this problem. But is it? Well, CGTN's Ramanyang sought some answers.
At this point in time, East Africa is home to the continent's only profitable airline, Ethiopian Airlines. And of course, it's still the largest carrier by a fair bit on the continent as a whole. But the industry at this point in time is in the middle of a vigorous debate about what the future market of aviation services will look like. On one hand, you've got the advocates for a more open, a more common market with an open air skies policy, like Rwanda's CEO, Yvonne Makolo.
Tourism will be facilitated. So there's only we can only gain from opening up our skies. Yes, there might be some initial turbulence, but in the end game is to be able to facilitate our citizens to move from one point to the next. So this is something that we should critically look at.
But on paper, on the other side of the equation, you've got advocates who argue that, look, it's all well and good to propose an open market, but it doesn't really make any sense when all the players within that market have very different mandates and very different funding structures.
You know, it's a very nice idea, which in practice doesn't work. It doesn't work. Countries have a tendency to protect their own carriers, and I am the first to understand it. I think that if you want to have common airspace operating, which is a somehow copy of what Europe has done with open skies many years ago, you need to align different things. You cannot compete if you have different financial structures of the airlines. So the question is, how do you compete with an open market if airlines are financed differently?
And for Rwanda, as far as its aviation investments are concerned, this is something it's taken on quite seriously. Rwanda hasn't been profitable for many a year, but at the same time, that hasn't stopped the government from pumping hundreds of millions of dollars, not just into the carrier, but also into support infrastructure, like the Kigali Convention Center for business tourism and meetings as well, but also into an entirely new airport, the Bugesera International Airport. That's still a few years away from completion. Ultimately, though, The question does remain. Which of these two camps will win out in the end? That's something we'll have to wait and see. Ramanyang, CGTN, Kigali.
Well, U.S. tech giant Apple has just held a big event with much fanfare, but it was a little different than the tech giant's usual show. Now, there was no new hardware at all. It was all about services and some big ones. And here's Mark New telling us what it was all about.
With weaker sales in China taking its toll, Apple is taking a new approach to making iPhones more affordable. The Silicon Valley giant is teaming up with Alibaba's Ant Financial to offer interest-free financing for iPhones that can be paid off from 3 months to as much as 2 years. For the new iPhone XR, that would mean paying about $40 a month.
If you look at Apple's line of phones and their prices, even the least expensive of their phones is still pretty expensive in China compared to, say, Oppo and Vivo and a number of the bigger players there in China. So to remain competitive in a market that's very highly saturated, they really have to be aggressive in terms of what they're able to do in terms of pricing.
In Beijing, we found a number of customers taking advantage of the financing program.
I prefer the interest-free loan way because cash flow is important. This will make life easier.
We just graduated, so our income is not much. An interest-free loan helps reduce our economic pressure. We just bought an iPhone through interest-free loans a few days ago. Only had to pay 200 RMB per month, which is budget-friendly.
But as Apple attempts to become more affordable to middle-class consumers in China, it also faces struggles at home. A handful of companies have already unveiled foldable phones and 5G phones, both considered groundbreaking achievements. Apple has not introduced these technologies or even mentioned them.
Today, we're introducing...
But Apple is going in another direction, announcing a new credit card called Apple Card, a partnership with Goldman Sachs. Apple says the card will have no annual fees or late fees and will focus heavily on privacy. When used via Apple Pay, customers will get 2% cash back on transactions and 3% when spent on Apple products. Apple hopes the incentives will lure customers in.
I'm not in the market for a new credit card right now, and if I was, I'd be wanting to consider all of the options.
We have 3 iPads, 2 iPhones, an iMac, a desktop Mac, so and they all integrate really well together, so being able to purchase those things through an Apple credit would be great.
I think it would be fair to say they'd love to be the Alipay or the of the U.S. or the WeChat of the U.S. in that regard, because that's a very comprehensive way to pay for almost anything over in China. And if Apple can have a piece of that, that would be a very important deal for them.
Apple Card also differs from the competition in that the actual physical card will be made of titanium and will not have a card number, expiration date, or signature. Mark New, CGTN, Cupertino, California.
Now, in Benin, China has established a school of excellence called the Sino-Beninois School of Friendship. The school will help to boost the academic abilities of the country's top students.
The Sino-Beninese Friendship School consists of a top-notch administration, 5 ultra-modern classrooms, one of which is computerized and fully equipped by digital technology giant Huawei.
China offered this jewel to Benin to serve as a primary school, but the local authorities had a certain vision for the education system. And after seeing everything that had been invested in this school, they celebrated it as the best tool to launch the president's vision. So the decision was taken to make it a symbol of excellence, a general education school like all other schools, with the advantage of digital tools.
The school was launched on September 2018 for the 2019 school year. Students were selected on the basis of tests and to learn Mandarin every day with the help of volunteer teachers.
Looking at the results the children achieved in the first semester, I see that these children have truly become excellent. And compared to the other schools currently operating, we are now seeing that the excellent name will actually bear fruit. Because in addition to the English and French language they are taught in school, they learn other languages out there. They also learn a little bit about agriculture, which is not the case in other schools.
Française et la langue anglaise qu'on apprend à l'école, ils ont d'autres langues qu'ils apprennent sur le terrain.
At the moment, the school comprises of a single 6th grade class with a gender parity enrollment of pupils, 15 girls and 15 boys. Availability of electricity to operate dorms and run digital classes remains a major challenge. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, as the Africa CEO Forum wraps up in Kigali, Rwanda, we take a closer look at how best Africa's loss-making aviation sector can be revived. Of course, all that are coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Rucha. Well, let's take a short break. Your sports news coming up next. Still ahead, Kenya's Fatuma Zarika defends her WBC Super Bantamweight title.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start with boxing news. Kenya's Fatuma Zarika defended her